You know, your DNA, it's like this giant personal instruction manual. It's got something like 20,000 chapters. We call them genes. And every single one tells a story. Today, we're going to dive into some of the most incredible ones ever found.
So here's this crazy paradox at the heart of our biology, right? On one hand, your genes make you, well, you. They give you your unique traits, your quirks, maybe your predispositions. But at the same time, they hold these super ancient blueprints that connect you and me to, like, the entire animal kingdom. So how does our DNA pull off both of those things? Let's dig in and find out. Okay, to get to the bottom of that question, we're going to look at 4 very specific genes. Each one tells a totally different story about risk, about resilience, and about this deep history we all share. And our first story? It starts with something a lot of us think about pretty much every day.
So, this first story is about a gene that chances are you're carrying right now. And it has an influence on something we usually chalk up to just willpower, our weight. This is the story of the FTO gene.
All right, so every single one of us has this FTO gene, but it's not one size fits all. It comes in different flavors. And get this, about half of the entire world's population has at least one copy of a version that bumps up their risk of obesity by about 20%. And for the 16% of people who have 2 copies, that risk jumps up to a whopping 50%. And here's a fun little piece of trivia for you. Scientists actually used to call this the fatso gene. But, and this is the crazy part, it had nothing to do with body weight. Nope, it got the nickname simply because it was a physically huge gene on the strip of DNA they were looking at. It wasn't until 2007, when they found the link to body mass, that they thought, yeah, okay, maybe we should find a more professional name.
So, does this mean your weight is totally out of your hands? Just set in stone by your genes? No way. Absolutely not. The FTO gene might give you a nudge in one direction, a predisposition, but your lifestyle choices are way more powerful. Things like physical activity, for instance, have been proven to completely cancel out that genetic tendency. It helps regulate your appetite, no matter which version of the gene you happen to have.
Okay, for our second story, we're going to take a much darker turn. This one involves a gene that's been linked to aggression, a really brutal crime, and a courtroom defense that might have actually saved a man from the death penalty. This is the story of MAOA, what some people call the warrior gene.
So what is this gene exactly? Well, MAOA makes an enzyme that's basically like a cleanup crew for your brain. Its job is to break down these really powerful mood chemicals, things like serotonin and adrenaline. But some people have a version of this enzyme that's, let's say, a little less active. And when that cleanup crew isn't working as hard, those chemicals can start to build up, which can potentially lead to more impulsivity and aggression. And this little bit of genetics burst onto the legal scene in a pretty shocking way. A guy named Rene Patrick Bourassa was convicted of a horrific murder. But then his lawyer brought up evidence that he had this warrior gene variant. The argument they made was that his genes predisposed him to being violent. Now, he was still found guilty, but he avoided the death penalty. It's wild to think, but his DNA might have literally saved his life.
But here's where this whole story gets, well, really complicated. You'd think a warrior gene would be super rare, right? Well, it's not. Not even close. In fact, about 1 in 2 people, yeah, that's right, nearly half of us, are walking around with this exact same gene variant right now. So, does that mean half of us are ticking time bombs destined for violence? Of course not, and that's the whole point. This is such a brilliant example of a core truth about genetics. A gene is not a sentence. The huge, overwhelming majority of people with this variant live totally normal, peaceful lives. It's a risk factor, sure. It's one tiny piece of a massive puzzle, but it is never, ever the whole story. All right, let's shift gears completely. For our third story, we're moving away from the things that make us different and towards something that is just profoundly unifying. We're going to look at the master gene responsible for building one of our most precious organs, the eye. Its name is PAX6. So scientists did what I think is one of the most mind-bending experiments in all of biology. They took the human version of the PAX6 gene, the one that tells a human embryo, hey, start building eyes, and they stuck it into a fruit fly and turned it on. The result? It's just unbelievable. The fly grew a brand new,
totally perfect fly eye on its leg. I mean, can you imagine seeing that?
So what on earth does that mean? Well, it proved that the human gene and the fly gene are basically interchangeable. They're just two slightly different versions of the same ancient master on switch. The human gene went into the fly and just said, build an eye here. And the fly's body was like, okay, I know how to do that, and followed the instruction using its own fly eye building plans.
And this connection, it goes so much deeper. I'm talking from the simple little light sensing spots on a flatworm, all the way to the super complex eyes of a parrot or a panda, and even the eyes of the biggest animal on the planet, the blue whale. That same master gene, PAX6, is the one kicking off the whole process. It's this beautiful, invisible thread of shared history that's woven through almost all of us.
All right, our fourth and final story. This one's about a simple genetic typo, just a random little mistake that gives some very lucky people what you can only really call a biological superpower. This is the story of the CCR5 gene and how it connects to HIV.
Let's just start with a number. 1 in 100. 1 out of every 100 people walking around has something truly remarkable baked into their DNA. So, what is it?
They are completely 100% naturally immune to HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. And this isn't something they get later in life. It's a protection they are born with, all thanks to a very specific version of a gene called CCR5.
And the science here is actually pretty straightforward. Just imagine the normal CCR5 gene creates a kind of gateway, or a doorway, on the outside of our immune cells. Now, HIV has to use that specific gateway to get inside and do its damage. But a little mutation, it's called Delta 32, it basically just removes the gateway. It bricks up the doorway. And if there's no gateway, there's no entry. The virus is literally locked out.
And this protective gene is way more common than you might think, especially in people with European ancestors. As you can see here, about 20%, that's 1 in every 5 people, has one copy of it, which gives them some protection. But it's that 1%, the 1 in 100, who get a copy from both parents, who get the full-blown biological superpower, complete immunity.
Okay, so let's put it all together. What have we learned from these 4 stories? Well, we saw with the FTO gene how genetics can give you a predisposition, in this case for weight, but your choices really steer the ship. And with the MAOA gene, we saw how it can be a risk factor for aggression, but it is absolutely not a life sentence. Those first 2 stories really show us how our genes help make us unique individuals.
Then, PAX6 flipped the script and showed us this incredible story of unity, a universal blueprint that connects the eyes of almost every animal out there. And finally, the CCR5 gene kind of brings it all home. It shows how a single, unique mutation, a tiny little difference in our otherwise shared code, can create this incredible, life-saving resilience. It's all there: risk, unity, and these amazing, unexpected strengths.
You know, our genetic code is just amazing. It's a history book, a medical chart, and a story of our deepest connections, all rolled into one. And we've only just scratched the surface. We've only uncovered a few of its secrets. It really makes you wonder, with more than 20,000 genes making us who we are, what other incredible stories are still in there, just waiting for us to find them?